Apple has finally updated their iPad Pro lineup with the new M4 chip from the already overpowered M2 chip. They added a state-of-the-art OLED screen, and the question on my mind after living with this guy for the past month, it really is, should you? Should you upgrade from the 2022 model or even from the 2018 or 2020 iPad Pro? Is this the year to upgrade? Let's talk about it. Apple has been making incredible hardware for their iPad Pro lineup for years. I bought myself a 2018 iPad Pro back in 2018, and it has been by my side ever since with minimal complaints. The 3 years after 2018 were kinda mid, to be honest. They saw incremental upgrades that brought the M series to the iPad, which incredibly powerful chip with the M1 and then the M2, and it even saw a micro LED display come to the 12.9-inch model, but that was exclusive to only the bigger model, and it sort of felt like a half step between LCD and OLED. But this time around, it really feels like a lot of things are changing on this iPad that kind of make it interesting for an upgrade or even for a first-time buy, with some familiar caveats. First off, there's the display. Being a videographer, nothing really makes me happier than seeing a great display on a product that I already liked. And this OLED display is without a doubt the single most impressive display I have ever seen in person. 1000 nits full screen is an incredible achievement on its own. Most OLED TVs, for example, will only reach around 200 nits when displaying a full white, but it's across the entire color spectrum that I think this display really stands out. The colors really are spectacularly bright and well saturated, and the out-of-the-box experience really is top-notch. Doing a side-by-side between the LCD on my 2018 model, the micro LED on the 2022 version, and the OLED, the differences can really be perceived by literally anyone. From increased brightness to much better blacks, it is a marked improvement and will not leave you indifferent. SDR and particularly HDR content really looks immaculate, with great peak brightness as well as Apple's typically well-calibrated colors to make this an absolute joy for anything from photo and video editing to gaming and media consumption. I also noticed some interesting details about the display, like for starters, the corners are slightly more rounded and the coating on the glass looks very similar to the anti-reflecting coating that I saw on the Samsung S24 Ultra, making outdoor usage even just better, but with a similar trade-off to the S24 Ultra, where if the light is hitting the screen in just the right way from the side, the blacks will look slightly grayish, reducing the perceived contrast in some scenarios, proving once again that life is but a huge game of compromises. Keep in mind that this is using the regular screen coating and not the nano texture that, by the way, is only exclusive to the 1 and 2 terabyte models for money reasons, I guess. But speaking of different models, the OLED screen is available in both the 11 and 13-inch model, which was not what happened with the micro LED that was only available on the larger device, which, you know, if you've seen my latest video here on Android Authority about small phones, you know how much I enjoy just being able to choose a size of a device instead of just being limited to, you know, picking the device with the specs that I'm looking for the most and making a device size just an afterthought. All models come with the new M4 chip, which is bonkers fast and efficient, but only the 1 and 2 terabyte model come with the best version of M4 with 10 cores and 16 gigs of RAM. The 256 model I have here and the 512 come with only 9 cores and 8 gigs of RAM, which from a CPU standpoint is mostly irrelevant, and I do not think you will be able to tell at all in 99% of scenarios. But the lower RAM capacity, particularly half, is kind of a thing that tends to age Apple devices worse. Like, for example, my 2018 model has only 4 gigs of RAM, and it's definitely starting to show some signs of aging. So if 8 was 16 gigs, maybe that could delay, you know, a device end of life maybe for, I don't know, like a couple extra years at the end. But given the price that Apple charges for storage, it really is a hard sort of choice to make with, you know, just how preposterously expensive it already is. The M4 is of course faster than M2, but in day-to-day life you're definitely not going to be able to tell much of a difference. Like, even comparing to my 2018 model, if I open and close some apps around, you'll definitely see that the new one is faster, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference. If you have pro workloads like drawing, video editing with DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut, or you will be able to see a difference in render times and how fast your timeline behaves, but other than that, the different specs aren't really a major selling point, I would argue, for most people when they come to picking a new iPad Pro for their particular use case. But I have been quite intrigued when it comes to the neural engine on the new M4 chip. Like, for starters, it's the best on any Apple device currently, which right now it means that certain machine learning tasks are done faster and better, but it could mean that when Apple starts to add a little bit more of AI features to iOS, this device will be capable of doing all the tasks as fast as possible. For reference, the M4 neural engine does 38 trillion operations a second, which is 8% more than the iPhone 15 Pros, but 2.4 times the latest M2 iPads and 7.6 times the performance of my 2018 iPad Pro. So this sort of huge discrepancy in the neural engine performance can really be the difference between doing a task or not doing a task, or more likely could be the difference between doing a task locally on device or just sending something to the cloud, waiting for a reply and getting it back on the other end. It really will depend on how Apple sort of plans on integrating these AI features. Another big change is the new thinner design. Look, I'm not a huge fan of all the compromises that come with making a device thin and light, but you gotta admit, man, it looks impossible. For starters, the reduced weight is meaningful, and if you've ever held another 12.9 model in your hand, you know that they're not the lightest thing to hold. This time round, taking notes whilst holding it feels less of an effort, and the impossibly slim design makes this device look like something that really shouldn't be possible. They've also reinforced the middle of the chassis, making it slightly more of a struggle for jerry-rig everything to bend it in half, but at the end of the day, it's still a huge screen with a 5.1mm device. If you try to bend it, it will bend and it will break, but on day-to-day usage, I do not think it's something that you should have to worry. Particularly if you plan on getting a folio case, or even better, a Magic Keyboard. With that, it will be just as stiff as any old laptop and you will not have to worry about breaking it in half, which is a weird sentence to say out loud. Cooling is also meaningfully improved thanks to some copper being infused on the Apple logo, which is a very Apple sentence. But at the end of the day, you really do feel like something has changed. Like in the past, if I was using my device as well as charging at the same time, I could definitely feel the chassis getting warmer. But this time around, it really just sends the heat away much quicker, and I guess it can only be better for aging and continuous performance and just the battery sort of staying healthy and happy for a long time. Some small changes that I also notice in no particular order. The speakers are definitely less bassy than previous iPad Pros, still sound great, and in some circumstances I prefer the soundstage that they create for certain tracks, but the bass is definitely less, and it's definitely a consequence of the slimmer design. The rear of the iPad lost the ultra-wide camera that wasn't really great to begin with, and now looks like the weirdest camera cutout Apple has ever made, with 5 different sized circles. The main camera is still the same, and I guess it still works. It's nothing spectacular, it's fine in my book for documents and video calls, but that really is about it. The front-facing camera is finally in the correct position down in the middle, which made Apple rearrange the magnets for the pencil, which made the old pencil incompatible, and you have to get the new Pencil Pro, which is just so Apple. But alas, the camera is still the same as the M2 iPads and the M1 iPads. It's still a huge improvement from the 2018 and even the 2020 iPad Pro camera that was very zoomed in and terrible quality. This one is nice for video calls and all the things, so yeah, it's the same, and damn you Apple for ruining old Pencil. Battery life is about the same as previous iPads, and I had no issues using it for an entire workday with multiple long video calls and 8 hours of screen on with very high brightness, with still 35% battery remaining at the very end, and the idle usage is still top tier. It is, however, marginally smaller in capacity compared to the 2022 M2 iPad Pro, coming in at 10,290 mAh versus 10,758. I've also been using the Apple Pencil Pro and the Magic Keyboard paired with everything, and I mean, they are all marked improvements from the previous generation, but the thing that got on my gears the most is the fact that all these devices are fundamentally the same shape and almost identical sizes, but if you're planning on doing any sort of upgrading to this new model, you have to consider that you can't bring any accessories. So if you're planning, for example, on upgrading the iPad and keeping your old Apple Pencil and your old Magic Keyboard, you can't. Or if you're planning on just getting the accessories for your M2 iPad Pro or any other iPad Pro before it, you also can't. The Apple Pencil Pro is exclusive to the M4 iPad, and the new Magic Keyboard is exclusive to the M4 iPad as well, which is just... find me a word here. Apple, I guess. The new Pencil Pro, much like the older Pencil, is still an essential accessory for the iPad if you're planning on using it as a drawing device, which is still a huge market for iPad Pro, and the new haptic feedback and barrel roll features are really well integrated. You even get a fake software shadow that perfectly matches the tool you're using and even shows the rotation of said tool in real time, which for the first time in a good way in this video, it's very Apple. And the haptic feedback really is well tuned to just hop around the interface and just keep you focused on your work and quickly switch between tools. It really feels like a marked improvement. Which brings us to the new Magic Keyboard, which coming in at $300 really should not be this expensive. And this is coming from someone that spends a large amount of money on custom keyboards that cost more than $300. But alas, Apple charges $300 for this. I would argue very good, very important, and very versatile accessory for the iPad Pro, but definitely very overpriced. It is a great piece of hardware made fully of aluminum with a soft covering on the outside that works beautifully with the iPad, with properly sized keys on the 13-inch model, and this time round a function row, a large trackpad with haptic feedback similar to what you would find on a Mac, and a proper charging port that supports exactly the same 35-watt max charging speed as you would get on the main USB port on the iPad, which was an improvement from the M2 iPad and all previous iPads that had sort of the Magic Keyboard integration. That port usually charged at much less speed than the main USB port on the iPad, which is no longer the case. Fun fact, 35 watts is the max charging speed that any iPad has supported since my 2018 iPad Pro, so Apple hasn't really been pushing for faster charging on iPads. These accessories are all great, they work fantastic, but I really feel like there isn't any excuse to charge $300 for a keyboard that at best will be completely obsolete in 4 years' time, judging by Apple's previous track record, which I just feel like it's just bad for everyone. But it is great, it works fantastic, and you will not be disappointed if you have the cash to just spend on it, but just count on it being obsolete in 4 years' time, which for a keyboard, I didn't think it should happen. Also, the soft touch on the outside, the material itself, it doesn't have any feet to sort of stand on, so you're kind of just rubbing it on every surface that you put your iPad on, which for durability, I don't think it'll be the best, but only time could tell on that one. So yeah, just be careful where you put it and you should be good to go. Which brings us to iPadOS. It's still in a weird situation that hopefully we'll see some clarity this week during WWDC. This is still a profoundly overpowered $12.99 iPad that excels at doing iPad things. It's starting to be able to do some Pro things eventually, and it's still great for drawing and all of those creative tasks, but still an iPad at the end of the day. But the only Apple device that comes with the best chip they offer. It has more performance than a MacBook Air, but still an iPad. That's the iPad Pro M4 13-inch comparison video thingy. Hopefully you enjoyed it and it helped you make your purchase decision. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.